this dreary New England day. My name is Alindra Canty, and I am the Vice President of the Hopkinton Freedom Team. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy is quoted saying, "The life of Frederick Douglass is part of the legend of America. As a successful fighter for freedom a century ago, he can give inspiration to people all around the world who are still struggling to secure their full human rights. That struggle must go on until those rights are everywhere secured. By advancing that cause through law, democratic methods, and peaceful action, we in America can give an example of the freedom which Frederick Douglass symbolizes." That quote was over 60 years ago and is still very relevant today. And that proves we've got work to do. Thank you all for being here. I am honored to share this space with each of you for such a deep and meaningful event. I would first like to recognize Senate President Karen Spilka, Representative James Arena DeRosa. Round of applause. Thank you for being here. I would also like to recognize our town leaders, residents, students, guests, and our very own HCAM. We also have wonderful musicians joining us today. We have the duo Willie J. Laws and Bruce Matson, as well as Lana Katz. If you are interested in learning more about them, on the back table there's a QR code with a link to their information. Today's event was made possible through a grant from Mass Humanities, with funding made possible by the Mass Cultural Council. But it would not have happened without the passion and dedication of our own Hopkinton Historical Society Vice President and Professor Ann Matina. I would also like to thank the Hopkinton Freedom Team and the team at the Hopkinton Center for the Arts for their work in support of this event. Before we get started, I want to talk generally about comfort. Today, we're going to listen to and discuss some complex and sensitive content. We invite you to bring an awareness and a curiosity of how you're feeling as we progress through today's event, and take care of any needs that may arise for you. We invite everyone to take responsibility for what you think, say, and feel to make this as safe a space as possible. So, porta potties are over to the left. There's water and snacks on the table in the back. We're going to start the event today with greetings from Senate President Spilka. Then we will have our land acknowledgement read by Megha Shilvant, a 7th grade student at our middle school. And following that, we'll have Ann Matina, who'll come and ground us in the history of Frederick Douglass in New England. After Ann grounds us in her reading, we will begin our community reading of Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Senate President Spilka.
Hello, good day. It's a good day, even though the weather, it's really nice to be here with everybody. And it's wonderful to be with you this afternoon to honor the great Frederick Douglass. I want to also thank the organizations and people who made this possible for this special reading and acknowledgement, and helping us take a few moments to really think about Frederick Douglass, his life, what he stood for, and the amazing things he has accomplished, and the legacy that he has left for us. I want to thank the Hopkinton Historical Society, President John Palmer, Vice President Ann Matina, Hopkinton Freedom Team, Hopkinton Center for the Arts, Mass Cultural Council, Mass Humanities, and a few of my noted fellow orators, Congressman McGovern, Representative James Arena DeRosa, Muriel Kramer, and members of the Select Board, and the many distinguished guests that are here that will also have some readings. I wanted to let you know that many of you may not, I hope you do, that earlier this year, as Senate President, I added a bust of Frederick Douglass to the Senate chamber on Beacon Hill. We renovated the Senate chamber two and a half years ago, and there were alcoves that had busts, all of men in the Senate chamber, noted historians. I did not replace all of them. I left one open because we had a quote of Frederick Douglass, which I'll read, put on the wall so that as we are doing our work in the Senate chamber, his quote guides us. The other alcove I left vacant to put a woman, because there's not that many women in the State House. Frederick Douglass's bust, notably, was the first permanent bust of a person of color to ever take a place in the State House. And it's, I said, it sits just below a quote that is inscribed on the Senate walls. And that quote says, "Truth, justice, liberty, and humanity will ultimately prevail." So that is what guides us as we deliberate, as we discuss policies and laws for Massachusetts, and really takes a prominence in our debate and really helps us. We installed his bust on February 14th, Valentine's Day, during Black History Month. And we did it that special day because if you read history, Frederick Douglass, born as a slave, did not know when his actual birthday was. But his mother used to affectionately refer to him as his Valentine, as her Valentine's baby, as her Valentine's gift. So he adopted February 14th, Valentine's Day, as his birthday. His words and his life are so powerful because of how they moved our country to abolish slavery and our leaders to do what is right. But I think the true inspiration of his words and actions is how actually so very relevant they are today. As we continue to face inequities, racial injustice, climate crisis, healthcare problems, and so much more as a Commonwealth and as a nation. This is why I'm proud to have added his words to our chamber, and why I am proud that we are here today in Hopkinton, raising his voice once again to be an inspiration for our community and our state. Thank you again for inviting me.
As we come together to honor Frederick Douglass and the impact his words have upon our community today, it is important to acknowledge that we are meeting upon ancestral land of the Nipmuc Nation, or the freshwater people, as well as the Agawam and Massachusetts people. We further acknowledge that remnants of these groups converted to Christianity and moved to an area known as Magunko, where they were decimated by disease and King Philip's War. We give our thanks for their stewardship of this beautiful land.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Mattina, and I'm Vice President of the Historical Society. And for the last year, I've been a fellow with the Mass Humanities Council from their offices out in Western Mass, working on Frederick Douglass. The Frederick Douglass Reading Frederick Douglass Initiative has been in existence since 2009. It was started pretty much grassroots in Boston in 2009. And it's grown to over 40 towns and cities throughout the state, which read the speech together either during Black History Month, or some groups do it on Juneteenth, some other groups do it on the 4th of July. We chose this day because, you know, it's not going to rain anyway. Well, we thought it was a good time when people were still in town and still able to participate in this. And I'm so grateful for the number of people who willingly just said yes as soon as we invited them to read. One note, Congressman McGovern is not going to be here. Unfortunately, his aide called me. He's stuck in Washington because of the weather. His plane got delayed. So he was going to read at the very end, and I'm sorry that he won't be with us today. So I would also like to recognize the South Asian Circle of Hopkinton, whose members, again, jumped right in and volunteered their students as well as themselves to be readers today, and that's wonderful. And we hope that this combination of forces between all these wonderful organizations in town continues. So just a few notes about the speech itself. The speech was delivered actually on July 5th, 1852, to the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society. But Frederick Douglass first came to Massachusetts in 1838 as a fugitive slave from Maryland with his brand new wife, Anna Murray. They came to New Bedford because there was a thriving Black community in New Bedford, and Frederick had worked on the docks in Baltimore, so he knew he could get work in New Bedford similarly as on the docks. They began their family there, and Frederick started preaching. Some people don't know this about Frederick, but he learned to read, and he was very much a self-taught scholar through his teenage years. He studied the premier text on rhetoric called the Columbian Orator. It was a premier text on rhetoric in the 19th century, and he read it and practiced it. So he knew how to deliver a speech and what people were looking for in speaking, and he certainly was a gifted speaker from all accounts. Every report of his speaking talks about how his dynamic he was, how funny he was. He loved to mimic, and he was very engaged with the audience. He was invited to come to the Nantucket Anti-Slavery Society Convention in 1841. He was not on the program, but instead spoke from the floor in response to a couple of the resolutions. And then the next day, William Lloyd Garrison, the founder of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, called him up to deliver some remarks. We have to think of this. At the time, he was 23 years old, and he was commanding, this audience of people who were enthralled with his story of being a fugitive slave, and also enthralled with his abilities to, connect with the audience. At the end of the convention, the president of the Mass Anti-Slavery Society hired him on the spot to become an agent for the Anti-Slavery Society, and for the next 4 years, from 1841 until 1845, he spoke in over 60 towns and cities in the Commonwealth alone. He also spoke in Rhode Island and in New Hampshire, but I'm not working for them, I'm working for Mass Humanities. So I just stuck with Massachusetts for my project. So one of the places he spoke was right here in Hopkinton, and we had a very active abolitionist group in the town. We had a ladies' anti-slavery sewing circle. We also had a regular group of mixed gender. In those days, it was very often gender. People were separated by gender. But we had a mixed male and female group, and we also had a ladies' emancipation society. So we were very, we were connected in a lot of ways to these speakers and to this cause throughout even before Frederick Douglass appeared on the scene in Massachusetts. So we know definitively he spoke here in 1842. He spoke at the Hayden Row Hall, which was built in 1816 as an Episcopal church. I believe it was Episcopal. Then it moved. It moved up into town. The congregation moved, and it became a community center. The building stood, and someone from the group I'm sure will correct me, the building itself stood until the 1990s. It was a school, it was a firehouse, it served a lot of purposes in the community, but it's no longer there, unfortunately. It also was host to a whole slew of very important figures in the 19th century reform movements, temperance and slavery and women's rights. Lucy Stone, who's one of my all-time favorites, from outside of Worcester, West Brookfield. She spoke here more than once. So we have a rich heritage with reform in our community, and we're very lucky to have had Frederick Douglass here in 1842 at the age of 24. So Frederick continued on speaking all over the state, as far west as Lanesboro, which is way up in the northwest corner of the state, and as far south as Nantucket. He went to Nantucket again and again. He went to the Vineyard again and again. He also came, and obviously Boston. After the family, as the family grew, they moved from New Bedford to Lynn, where they stayed for 7 years. In 1845, Douglass was challenged all the way through his early career as a speaker, as perhaps not being legitimate, not being legitimately who he said he was. How could this man be this gifted orator that attracted crowds from all over? How could he possibly be a fugitive slave? So he took the time to write his memoir. It's his very first memoir. He wrote a total of 3. It was published in 1845, but by doing so, he revealed himself as a fugitive slave. And this was at a time when slave owners could, in fact, come and get or hire someone to come and get their slaves and their fugitive slaves and return them to their condition of servitude. So it was thought, once Douglass did that, it was thought by the people of Mass Anti-Slavery and others that he should probably spend some time out of the country. And he left his family in Lynn under the care of some good neighbors, and he voyaged over to England. He started in England, just spent a couple of days there first, and then went to Ireland, where he was supposed to stay for 4 days. He ended up staying 4 months. And I just came back from a trip with Mass Humanities. We spent 2 weeks in Ireland, where they celebrate Douglass Week every year in Belfast, Cork, Dublin, Tipperary, because those were all places he spoke, and he really spoke to the people of Ireland. Luckily, they're coming here next year. They'll be in Boston. Douglass Week from Ireland will be in Boston for a period in April, and so keep that, keep a lookout on your calendar for that. Obviously I can talk about Frederick from now until the rain stops, but I'm not going to do that. I will instead ask you to welcome our first reader, who is again Senate President Karen Spilka.
Thank you, Anne. That was wonderful. I know he's such an amazing person. But I will start the reading and start it now. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th July oration. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This, to you, is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British Crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland. Although a considerable distance from your home did impose the exercise of its parental prerogatives upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent of that day were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equally. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny, so indeed I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles, be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that ought to command respect. He who will, intelligently, lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests.
They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that that is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom is not human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits. and thundered from your legislative halls and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to others. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and His cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done it much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring upon our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, but not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the ground-illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful way of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with a popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future.
Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call into question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light?
As we sit together in this moment and continue to listen and consider the meaning and the implication of the words of Frederick Douglass, we invite you to think about this. Who bears the responsibility for educating audiences about racial injustice today? So let's reflect as we listen to a song by Mr. Willie J. Laws and Bruce Mattson.
We ain't never had the rights like it says in the Constitution. The document of freedom not meant for women and people with the same skin color as me. We ain't never had the rights like it says in the Constitution. The document of freedom not meant for women and people with the same skin color as me. Yeah, that was written by slave owners wanting to be free. What hypocrisy! Calling me 3/5 of a man. Got people growing up in this land thinking that they're better than me. Started out wrong, foundation ain't strong. I hope we can make it right. Am I right? Are you right? Oh, who's right? Who's right? Looks like we might have to start all over, y'all, and bake a brand new pie. One with the ingredients of empathy, compassion, and love, and a little bit of eye to eye, yeah. Mendacity surrounds us. Until now, it's a word that we've hardly heard. Lord have mercy. All these lies, 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 lies. When they was handing out rights, we couldn't stand in the line. Now it's our time. Yeah, it ain't right. Do it taste right? Do it feel right, baby? It don't even smell right. Yeah. It don't smell right. Uncle Sam done turned into some kind of freak, messing with the children of democracy. I've seen people grabbing guns, Bibles, and flags, running up and down the street hollering, "I'm a patriot." Yeah, digging themselves in bastions of scoundrels and thieves and the willful ignorant. Those monuments and walls of negativity that have been built around here need to be torn straight down. I ain't lying. Yeah. So maybe when true freedom rings, we can all hear the sound. Didn't start out right, ain't never been right. Oh Lord, I hope that we can make it right. Can we make it right? I hope we can make it right. Every citizen make it right. The right? Thank you.
Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then will I argue with you that the slave is a man.
Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillsides, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all confessing and worshiping the Christian God and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulties, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to insult and make myself ridiculous, to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would, today, pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, and your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and the solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages.
Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now, as the price of men was never higher, and which is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The foreign slave trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There see the old man with locks thin and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See too that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly, you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank, and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on.
Follow this drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where, under the sun, you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States. I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chained gangs that passed our door.
Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. But a still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
For black man, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion.
The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains is sufficient, under this hell-black enactment, to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor.
Let this damning fact be perpetually told, that it be thundered around the world, that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe, and are bound in deciding in this case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in a diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation.
The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner in American Christianity. Where these go may also be the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He's a bird for the sportsman's gun by the most foul, fiendish of all human decrees. The liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is a hunting ground for men. Your lawmakers have committed all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state and force, has a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have within the past 2 years been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children and depended on them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior than the right of marriage and all rights of this republic, the rights of God included.
I'm Kathleen Dinsmore. I'm the founder and president of the Hopkinton Freedom Team. And before we listen to some music, I just have a question for you to ponder on what we just listened. What contradictions do you think Frederick Douglass would be talking about today in our nation in considering freedom? Who enjoys freedom and who does not? So let's listen to some music. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again very much, ladies and gentlemen. This will be our last little tune here for you. I am an artist. I write songs that try to invoke or evoke thoughts and maybe a little bit of love and compassion, but for the most part, I am sixth-generation Texan. I am the product of a Confederate slave owner. I am an American. Get your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. Get your knee off my neck. I need a whole lot of let alone. Like a crooked road we can't navigate, being drunk when you can't see straight, a bitter smile on a cold day in hell. reasons why I bear your hate, not on me to articulate, and not my job to help you understand. Get your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. Get your knee off my neck. I need a whole lot of let alone. Do this, don't do that. Don't look angry, don't talk back. If you deal with the folks, keep your hands on the wheel. Yes or no, sir, I don't know, sir. I ain't reaching for no gun, sir. Click bang, your fantasy is my reality. Get your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. Just get your knee off my neck. I need a whole lot of let alone. Yeah. Get your knee off my neck. I need a whole lot of let alone. Next verse. What is America's mysterious lure that calls me back where hatred knows no cure, no justice, no peace, and no equality? Been trying to take my body, been trying to take my mind. Can't have my soul, baby, that's mine. Oh, that belongs to me. Oh, just get your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. Get your knee off my neck. I need a whole lot of let alone. I need a whole lot of let alone. I just need a whole lot of let alone. A whole lot of let alone. A whole lot of let alone. Yeah.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad, honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation. A system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty.
You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make sad the wrongs, the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till the gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence, and you would hail him as an enemy of the nation, who dares to make these wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of liberty, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of the British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own.
You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet, you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword in a mocking earth.
It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were a sheet anchor of all your hopes. Be warned, the horrible reptiles coiled up in your nation's bosom, the venomous creatures nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 million crush it and destroy it forever.
But it is answered in reply to all of this that precisely what I have denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of the Republic. Then, I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers, instead of being the honest men I before declared them to be, were the various impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this basis on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least, so I believe, and others have, as I think, clearly and fully vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented to the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lord Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. So we say this part together. All Godspeed, the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will become and change into a faithful friend each foe. That concludes the reading of What to the Slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass. Thank you all who participated.
Handing out rights. We couldn't stand in the line. Now it's our time. Yeah, it ain't right. Do it taste right? Do it feel right, baby? It don't even smell right.